So we're starting yesterday in the Sikhs. The klal of Yisro, the big issue with Yisro is that he's the Gertzad, he's the righteous convert. And in this particular case, it isn't only his credibility that the story is focusing on. It's the credibility he brings to Yiddishkeit and to Yidmut, to Torah mitzvahs. But there's another issue. And the other issue is that it says in the Zohar that without Yisro there's no Matan Torah. Without Yisro there's no Matan Torah. And by the way, in this Sikha, the Rebbe is going to argue. If there had been Yisro, there would not have been Amalek. The fact that last week Amalek attacks us is because Yisro had not yet arrived. You hear? So Yisro is very important for a variety of reasons. The class that we had before was general, and I felt very important about the idea of Gatus. So we shall continue. We're going to start from the beginning. Now, you girls know already how this operates. I read only the parts that are underlined. I gave out sichas, right? You have one? You have one? I'm going to read only the parts that are underlined. I'm telling you straight, I had planned to teach this entire sikha today, but first of all, I showed up a half an hour late. Kedaki b'kodesh, kedaki b'choyel, or less than choyel. And we had a great conversation about things which other than the sikha, so we're not going to finish. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes setting up what we're going to be learning really next week. Okay? The Zohar, it says in the Zohar, the ad shalebo Yisro, until Yisro comes along. V'hoida la'akadosh baruch hu, and he submits, he acknowledges HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lo nitna ha'Torah liYisrael, the Torah is not given to the Jewish people. U'kishaba Yisro, and when Yisro arrives, V'omar, and he says, Baruch Hashem, right? Baruch Hashem. Who says Baruch Hashem? Yisro says Baruch Hashem. Blessed be God. Asher hitel eschem v'gemer, that saved you from Pari and Mitzrayim. And then he makes a theological statement, a religious statement. Ata yadaiti, now I know, Kigadol Hashem mikol elikim, that God is greater than all the gods. Yisro was deeply steeped in the pagan tradition, in the tradition of Avodah Zarah. He was a big chacham. He was a big scholar in the ways of idol worship. He was an expert on it, if you will. And he had all kinds of ideas. He understood the various gods. He didn't only understand the stone and the gold that people worshipped. He understood the spirits, the life forces behind these deities that people were worshiping, including the Malachim. He was a very spiritual man. And he says, I understand what idol worship is. I understand the temptation. I appreciate, spirituality, which is klipa, spirituality, which goes against the principle of unity. Now I know this is real and that's not. Hashem is above all the other gods. It's a big deal. Now, of course, as Jews or as Hasidim, we say, big deal. So what? Big deal. Hey, sit down at the table and keep quiet. But to Yisro, it's a huge evolution. It's a huge development of his theological identity. And to Hashem, it's very important. Yisro is coming along and saying, after you died, God will Hashem is very important. I just want to say something to you. As you know, I sound like a broken record when I say this, and it also sounds very self-serving. I prepare. I don't just walk in this. I prepare. I mean, you can see that I prepare, but I really prepare. I want to prepare. I want to prepare because I want to learn. I don't just teach. This is important to me too. So I already know what's going to happen the next few classes after this one. One of the things that I'm not sure whether I'm going to teach it, and if I will, how I'm going to teach it, is a medrash. That the medrash says there are three or four famous statements about God. One is made by Rachav. You know who Rachav is? Rachav is also a convert. Rachav is the one who hid the two spies in the walls of Yericho when they were going to cross over the Yarden. According to the Chazal, Rachav married Yeshua. She put the red string out of her window, so they were able to save Rachav. So when the two spies came to her house, she also makes a statement similar to this one. I know about God. I know it's real. So there's a medrash which is brought in the Maimorim. The Marash brings it Barichas in the Hemshech Maim Rabim. And the Rebbe brings it in the Sikh in Chavtes, Chavtes Pashas Vaschanan. And I'm thinking to find a way to incorporate into our learning that discussion, because Chassidus actually explains that these three statements, the statement of Rachav, the statement of Yisro, and the statement of Moshe, are three levels. Three levels in Achas Hashem. In other words, these converts, these non-Jews who were great people and had their own ideas from before, who joined the family of Israel, and they embrace our beliefs, do so from their beliefs. They have what they had before, and they had how they examined critically their earlier beliefs, and how they said, no, this is wrong, this is right. And each one understood the right of Torah to a different level of depth. Not the right of Torah, the right of God. What the definition of God, and most importantly, the unity between God and the world, the relation between God and the world. Yerachov says it on one level, Yisro says it on a second level, and Moshe Rabbeinu says it on a third level. I think that's how the Medrash goes. And the passage that's quoted is this one. Ata yadaiti, now I know, these are Yisro's words. It's Yisro's ways of asserting his development, his advancement, his growing up, his evolving into what we call in our culture Achas Hashem, one God, as opposed to many gods, polytheism, many different gods. You understand? So again, I have in my mind a wish that I'm able to formulate enough material on this subject to make this into a class. I'm working on it. I have two shtikelach sichas that I'm hoping will help us. I don't have, but to me this is important. I want to go through this process of learning this with us in this series. But I'm this time just learning the pasuk. Says the Zayir Ayadezeh Paul, Yisro is coming and declaring that he believes that Torah is true. Influences the Stalek Kochebricha B'Yikare, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself in his glory, Eila V'Tata, on high and on low, Uloboser Yoev Eraisa, and only afterwards is he able to give us the Torah Bishlimu. What does Bishlimu mean? In wholeness or in peace. They both, wholeness and peace. Wholeness means you're not missing anything, and in peace means that the world supports the Torah that he's giving us, because Yisro's declaration of Gadol Hashem Yikol Elikim includes what is world, and therefore the world, or as the Rebbe is going to say in this Sikha, Klipa is also part of the Shlim, is also part of the Torah. And of course the question becomes why? This is a Zoharic statement. It's a Zohar that says that this is so many Mamari Chasidus on Vayishma Yisro begin with this Zohar. Yisro doesn't come, there's no Matan Torah. Who needs him? Why is it so important? So the Rebbe is going to explore this. The Pasha begins with the words Vayishma Yisro Kei Midyon Chesed Meshim. Ace Kolash Asa Lakim Lamesh Yisrael Ki. He took them out of Mitzrayim, right? Yisro, who was the priest of Midian. Kohen can either mean important person of, or the priest, the religious priest. And Yisro was actually a little bit of both. Who was the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu, as Kol Hashas Elokim, everything that Elokim did to Yidden and to Moshe Rabbeinu. And it actually says, Mashmua Shamo Ba, what did Yisro hear that compelled him to come? Two things. He heard everything. He heard about the 10 Makkahs, he heard about Yetzias Mitzrayim, but he heard about the Man, the Beresh Hamim. The two things that got him to go away from his place and to go out into the desert and join Moshe Rabbeinu was Kriyas Yamsuf and Mohammed Amalek. The splitting of the sea and the war with Amalek. And the Rebbe in this Sikha, like in many other Sikhas, asks these two things. The Man wasn't a big deal. The Slav wasn't a big deal. The Beresh Hamim is not a big deal. The 10 Makkahs is not a big deal. This, and the Rebbe is going to say yes, because it's a very specific insight into Kriyas Yamsuf and Mohammed Amalek that Yisro remedies, that moves Yisro, that Yisro, the way the Rebbe says in the Sikha, Yisro realizes that the Jews need him. After all the miracles, when he sees Mohammed Amalek, he says, they're not complete until I join. You hear? Yidden are not going to be complete till I join, because it's the only way to defeat Amalek once and for all. So the Rebbe says, Why is it necessary for the pasuk at this point to emphasize, emphatically, Shahaya Kayan Midian, he was a priest of Midian. There's a rule in Torah. The Gemara says this. The Gemara has certain policies about the Torah. Number one, you always write Balashon K'tzara. You write things as concisely as possible. You don't waste words. Number two, you speak Balashon Nikia. You speak in clean language. You don't describe things that are unclean graphically. And number three, you don't speak Begenus Chaya Tmeya. You don't speak negatively about any creation, not even a treifa animal. So many sichas are built on this question, this principle. If the Torah writes Lashon Ketzad, how come over here there's Lashon Harucha? If the Torah writes Lashon Nikiya, how come here it says Tmeya, not late Tehera? And if the Torah does not speak of Gunai, of a Behemoth Tmeya, why are we pointing out the shame of this one or this one or this one? And in this case, it's the shame of Yisro. That what? That is Kayim Midian. Right? Now, next underline that Lapidish Hasheni, there's two interpretations of Kayim Midian. And the second one is Shaya came in Lavedazad, he was a priest for idol worship. And therefore, Tamur B'Yosef, the question is particularly acute. V'chiba'a Torah kan. Is it the Torah's intention and order here, l'saper b'genusei, to speak the shame? So it doesn't stand right. Now look inside, footnote 10. The Torah will not even speak the shame of a non-kosher animal, let alone a non-Jew, let alone a human being, let alone a non-Jew or a Jew. Why do you have to remind us that he's Kayim? But to say it in different words is a very clear halacha in Shulchan Aruch, which everybody knows, that you're not allowed to say to a ger tzedek, and you're not allowed to say to a baal tshuva, it's an aveda. It's considered a nos dvarim, which is a terrible aveda, and the way the Gemara describes it, that there's no atonement for it. If you come out to a person who was once not Jewish and became a Jew, and you remind him of how they behaved before, that's called a nos dvarim. Ainah means that you're hurting a person by taking from them what's not yours. So usually Ainah is associated with inflation, charging too much money for a product. It's called Ainah. No, but if you charge too much money for a product, you have a breda, you give the money back. Ainah's devarim means when you use words to undermine the credibility of a human being by shaming them. You can't fix that. So the Ainah's devarim by Baal Tshuva. You're not allowed to say about tshuva, remember your old actions, and you're certainly not allowed to say to a ger tzedek, remember your earlier actions. So why does the Torah identify him as Kayan Midian? He was Chayson Moshe. It's good enough. Moshe Rabbeinu's father was a nice title. Why do you have to remind us that he was a priest for Avodah Zarah? That's the Rebbe's kasha, right? And the answer is very simple. The intention in the Torah, when they identify Yisro as the priest of Midian, is not to diminish the worth, the honor of Yisro, but to the contrary, the Tad is to describe his greatness and his honor, but over which he had in the past. He was considered a priest. Will further contribute to emphasizing how special it was when he came to convert. Right? And in the words of Rashi, his heart was generous. To go out into the desert, which is a place of nothingness, to hear words of Torah. Or to say it in different words, right? Who's the most honorable citizens in America? Who's most likely to be president? Lawyers. Lawyers. They're all lawyers. Huh? Donald Trump was a multi-millionaire, yeah. But they're lawyers. Lawyers. Not priests, not bishops, right? But not so long ago, the most honorable person in any civilization was the clergy. 500 years ago, knowledge was associated with the church. If you wanted to study science or astronomy and mathematics, you had to join the church. Really. Yisro is over 3,300 years ago. In times of Yisro, if you were a galach, you were a chevraman. It was a good station. It was a good position to have. It was a good position to have because it's very honorable. It was also a good position to have because it represented something. It proved. If you were a Galach, you were literate, which was already a big deal. Most people couldn't read. If you were a Galach, you were learned in whatever knowledge they had in those times. Yisro was all of the above in spades. So calling him Kohen Midyan is actually a great compliment. And that's what the Rebbe is saying. The allusion to Yisro as being a priest to idols, not just the fact that he was a sad, an honorable, respectable, upstanding citizen, but that he was a priest of Avodah Zarah. It indicates the greatness of Yisro in his intelligence. If a person is so steeped in idol worship, it's because he understands the significance of idols. If he understands the significance of idols, that means he understands them. He understands theology, understands spirituality. Top of page 75 now. We know that the very beginning of the mistake, which is which ultimately let the people become involved in idol worship, they all started being great intellectuals. The first Avodah Zarah were brilliant, very smart. How smart were they? They looked up at the stars and they followed the patterns and they saw the cycles and they said Hashem is feeding the earth, nourishing the earth by the stars. And it was true. So they worshiped the stars in the belief that life is coming from the Eibishter to the world through the Malachim, through the stars, through the constellations, and therefore they should be honored. And there was a lot of legitimacy to that, except that it's idol worship, right? If you honor the servant of a king who brings you food from the king, you're made of malchus. You're rebelling against the king because you have to only honor the king. But it is true that this servant brought you the food. And the Avodah Zarah said we have to honor the servant also, not just the master. This was a mistake. Says the Rambam, which was the Rambam, Omru, they said, whereas Hashem created these stars, the Galgalim and these constellations and these orbits, as they translate them in English. Lahanig is Elam to govern the earth, the world. They worthy of being praised and beautified. Them covered that to give them respect. And then the Rambam says, this is what Hashem desires. So Avodah Zarah has a long history. I want you to know that in Hilchos Seder Torah, the Rambam tells a considerable story about idols, whole chapter. In the Moreh Nevuchim, it's even more. He mentions books by name that had in the ancient world that mentioned Avraham Avinu, the ancient Shittas of Avodah Zarah. He brings them at a big arichas, and he presents them as not fools, as being very bright, very intelligent, but they made a mistake. They made the worst mistake. But it didn't come from foolishness, it came from brilliance, from great intelligence, great intellect. And nobody represents this more than Yisro himself. Klema, this means, the truth really is that the flow of life from God, Nimshech comes to us, the stars and the constellations are a source of our life. Next paragraph. No, next underline. Nevertheless, also you're not allowed to honor them. For this, not because it's not true. It is true that we get life from the heavens, but there's no free will. But also have their own wants. They're like a hammer in the hands of a craftsperson, of a carver. So we're not allowed to honor them. But it's not a lie that because of them we have life. And the Avodah Zarah decided to honor them separately, which is considered an Aved. Moreover, just like physically there are the angels and the constellations. They're the source of life down here. Those are angels. Which are intermediates, as the Pasuk says, there's levels upon levels. There's a level, there's something above it, and something above that, ad infinitum. Even in the highest worlds, as harder we're warned to know that they're not allowed to be honored. They're simply like a tool in the hands of a craft person. But to be sure, but the higher the Mutayim are, there's a greater possibility of making a mistake. So calling Yisro Kohen Midyan is in no way belittling. V'zehu hapirush. This is the pshat. Shayisrei makir b'chola b'dezar shabam Yisrei knew all the idol worshippers and idols in the world. Had he had a knowledge and an understanding b'chola memotzim all the intermediates shabachola elamis in all of the world ad lamayla higher and higher. And l'shabayisei kei in Midian, because he was the priest of Midian, Ta'a, he made a mistake. He erroneously saw them as intermediates of their own power. Which is and then he left it all. Because he eventually figured out that it was wrong and he left it. Concludes the Rebbe, move on Mizet. This teaches us Gedel Hasagose Hasichlis Shayis, how smart he was. Mizet move on, therefore it's understood, Shaper, Zesha Kosov Mitare Shayakei and Midian. When the Taylor calls him the priest of Midian, is not putting him down. He's lifting him up. The Saper Bishvach, to say his praise, the Im Kol Zed, nevertheless, in Yechas Kol Gedulosei V'Chashavusa, he left his whole greatness and his whole honor, Ubal is guy he came to convert. Are we good? Verstanden? So IYH, we'll continue in a week. Mitzvah Shem. Okay, this is a new part of what we do here.
So Abelza, it's thinking that the intermediary is the source.
Had their own independence.